One. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining the League of Women Voters for our third session in this week's Lunch and Learn session. We are so delighted you're here to join us at this event. My name is Penny Sharon, and I am the League of Women Voters State Advocacy Chair. I want to be sure that you are able to see the slides. Julie, Nancy, just give me a thumbs up that you can see the slides and you can hear me clearly. Welcome. The League of Women Voters of Arizona, as is the US, is a nonprofit and a nonpartisan organization that is political. We neither support nor oppose any candidates. Today's event is brought to you by the Advocacy Committee Issues team focused on criminal justice reform. We are delighted to have the team leads run this session for us, okay? And we want to be sure that you have the best experience. So I'd like to go over a couple of norms in terms of what would make this a good experience for you to participate. All your microphones are muted. We ask that you post your questions in the Q&A tool on your Zoom control bar. Don't post your questions in the chat because the Q&A is what's being moderated by Nancy and Abdi Lopez, who I will introduce in a minute. Time permitting, the moderator will present the questions to the speakers. Unanswered questions, the advocacy team will do our very best to get answers for the speakers and share with those registered for the event. Contact us at LWVAZadvocacy@gmail.com for your comments and for any questions, follow-up questions. Today's session is being recorded and will be made available to you on YouTube, and also we will send you a link if you are either registered or are attending today. I would also like to alert you that you should get a survey right after this event is closed before the end of the day, and we appreciate your feedback. Our ability and our desire to improve the workshops that we hold and the lunch and learn sessions will be greatly informed by your feedback. It gives me inordinate pleasure to introduce two of our outstanding league members who are providing great leadership in the area, in the issue on criminal justice reform. I'm going to let these experts speak on that issue. Let me begin by introducing in reverse order by newest member first, and then a more long-standing member. I'd like to introduce Abdi Lopez. Abdi Lopez is a member of the League of Women Voters of Metro Phoenix, is passionate about the issue of criminal justice reform. It gives me such great pleasure to introduce Abdi. Several other things about Abdi. Abdi is preparing to get into law school. Abdi has been very active in that sphere. Abdi is passionate about educating her community of her Latino community, and we are grateful for the lens that she brings to our work and our discussion. More importantly, Abdi is our go-to Spanish translator. So we are doing a concerted attempt to make sure that content that we put out is translated in Spanish, and we are so grateful for Abdi's work and her commitment. And it's wonderful to see a brand new member take so much time to give of herself to the league. So Abdi will be speaking to you all pretty shortly. I'm going to introduce Nancy Hand. Nancy Hand is a long-term member of the league, is actually the president of the Greater Tucson Local League. Nancy was instrumental in establishing the criminal justice reform position for the League of Women Voters of Arizona. We're incredibly fortunate for her expertise, her guidance, and her wisdom in helping us take the stand. Nancy is also, maybe some of you know, a radio personality, has a lot of skills in that area. So we bring such a talented group of women to this issue as we do to so many issues that the League cares deeply about. Nancy, I'm going to hand it over to you, and thank you both Nancy, Abdi, and one of our presenters. We're waiting on the others. So Nancy, it's yours.
Thank you so much, Penny, for that introduction. And thank you to all the attendees here today. We're so happy to see you for this important session. I know we have some folks who are new to the League of Women Voters. So I just want to tell you a little bit about our new criminal justice position. Next slide, please, Penny. Oh, I'm sorry. I think it must be one slide back before that one. That's it, right. So for those of you who are new to the League of Women Voters only advocates on issues for which we have a position. All of our positions are thoroughly studied and then approved by consensus. And we have positions at the national level, at the state level, and also at the local level. And there are two ways that a league can adopt a new position. One is through creating an original study. This is a process that takes at least 2 years of in-depth study and analysis, as well as consultation with members in order to come to a consensus. For example, the League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson recently undertook this very long process around gun safety, and we now have a position on gun safety. The other way that the League comes to its positions is that we, as the Arizona League, can adopt a position that has been adopted by another league. And that's what we did in this case on criminal justice. We studied positions on criminal justice in other leagues, and we determined that the position of the state of California was very robust, very thorough, and very applicable to Arizona. So we undertook to adopt by concurrence that position. And we did so successfully last year in May of 2021. So prior to that, we were not able to advocate in the area of criminal justice as the League of Women Voters. So we are new to the table of advocating in criminal justice, and we're very eager to roll up our sleeves and get to work. And as you can see, we actually have already done that. I did want to just mention very briefly some of the elements of our position. I won't go into all the details, and this really is just an overview. You can find the full position at the League of Women Voters of Arizona website. But in brief, the position covers specific recommendations that we support in the area of policing practices, pretrial procedures, sentencing, incarceration, and reentry. And the general principles throughout those areas are the elimination of systemic bias, policing practices that promote safety for both law enforcement officers and the communities they serve, collaboration between government and community throughout every stage of the criminal justice system, a focus on humane treatment and rehabilitation with the goal of promoting successful reentry, and reliance on evidence-based research, including regularly scheduled audits of program and policy effectiveness. And as I said, there are very specific elements of this position that apply to the different stages of policing, pretrial procedures, sentencing, incarceration, and reentry. So this is the position that we use to analyze the bills in the legislature in order to determine our position as the League of Women Voters. As you all know, I'm sure the bills are coming at us all fast and furious in all the different areas. So we've been working hard to keep up. And if you are a League member and you are interested, there is plenty of room for you on the criminal justice issue team. So please let us know if you'd like to help with that effort. And now I would like to turn it over to my co-team lead, Abdi Lopez. It's a great pleasure for me to work with Abdi, and just adding just a bit on what Penny already said. Abdi is also an entrepreneur and a Spanish language broadcaster, and she's a great pleasure to work with. Take it away, Abdi.
Thank you so much, and welcome everyone. I see some folk attendees who have also, really been active in our committee and in our efforts. Although we are new, the efforts for criminal justice aren't. And some of the speakers that we have here today are precisely at the forefront of advocacy in criminal justice. So I want to present them. And although some of them might not be able to speak with us today, we have limited time. This sheds light that the League of Women Voters, we are in collaboration with individuals who are attorneys, individuals who have been advocates for years, and the issues that they advocate for align with our positions. So we're very happy that we're not in an empty room. We're in a room with warriors that have been there for a while. So if we have the opportunity to have Alma Hernandez present, she, you should know, is right now in the Judiciary Committee meeting. So she's fighting for judiciary change in our laws. And if she does make it, we will have her perspective on what she's seeing can actually pass through the legislature this year. And we will have the opportunity also to, contact her afterward. So if you have any questions at the end, you may ask them. So she is a graduate from Tucson, where she serves in the House of Representatives, and she now is part of the House of Human Services and Federal Relations, and she's the youngest legislator in the House. And our next speaker, if we have the opportunity as well, he is also testifying in the Judiciary Committee this moment. So at the forefront, right, of judiciary change. So he is the public defender, the deputy public defender of Pinal County. And before that, he was very active in Pima County, where he worked as an assistant with the public defender's office. He has also had, a lot of involvement in the community, and specifically with the Arizona Attorneys for Justice, where he is part of that board and directs a lot of the recommendations that get to the desk, Blackmun's desk, and by request of Blackmun and other, lawmakers, he is at the forefront of writing laws. So he would be a great person to ask very specific questions, and also the history of laws that have been written by his, by his team and himself in criminal justice. So although there is a lot of growth, there also has been a lot of work that has already been done that is also worthy of praise. So without further ado, let us present Julie Ganago, who's here with us today. She is somebody I admire a lot. She's an activist and has been involved in the criminal justice system for many years. She was a nominee in 2020 for Maricopa County Attorney. And she is the political director for the Arizona chapter of Reform for Marijuana Laws. And she's also currently director for the Arizona Poor People's Campaign, where she fights for housing justice. So a passion and an advocate for justice is not just in one area, but in many, many areas. So without further ado, let us get Julie Ganago's perspective on criminal justice and how, as a league member, she sees these positions align.
Yes, and first, let me thank you and thank the league, Penny, Abdi, Nancy, Catelli. You all are amazing, and the folks that are tuning into this today, really, I think they need to know just how much work goes on behind the scenes as the league is evaluating bills, as they're doing their research, and getting to see a little bit of that behind the scenes effort. I was absolutely floored about the wisdom and the study and the thoughtfulness that goes into the league's position. So I'm delighted to be here today. I am also delighted to be speaking before Nate Wade, who is an honest to goodness genius when it comes to all things about our criminal legal system. And of course, Representative Hernandez, who's just been wonderful on so many of these issues. So just a little bit, about me. As I started my career as a prosecutor in a teeny tiny county in Elkhart, Indiana, and then moved over to Cook County, where I prosecuted financial crime and public corruption. So I've gotten to see, what it looks like from both sides, really, in the courtroom, and what policies that the state should be pursuing if we're going to be in alignment with real justice. So one of the things that I'd like to share with the league today to kind of frame the conversation, because I think a lot of people are kind of confused about what we talk about when we say criminal justice reform. And you'll notice that I've started to even move away from the R word, reform, and more into talking about what needs to happen for it to be transformed, and talking about a criminal legal system instead of a criminal justice system. And that's for a few different reasons. First, there is no system to speak of. So when we talk about a criminal legal, system, we're really speaking about police, who of course who answer to different city and municipality governments. We're talking about the prison system that's overseen by an executive director who's appointed by the governor. We're talking about prosecutors who, by and large, are elected. We're talking about our public defenders. We're talking about a group of people who are all answered to different bosses in some cases and trying to implement different policy perspectives. So what happens at our state legislature, in theory, is the guidepost for what should be happening in our courtrooms. But in practice, the thing that I think more people need to recognize is that it's the prosecutor who holds all of these cards. Because when you go into a system that has gone more and more toward mandatory minimum sentencing, what you've done is you've taken the power from judges and you've placed them in the hands of prosecutors, where those charging decisions then mean everything. They determine how the case is going to play out, whether or not a person's going to be held pretrial, and all of those very early decisions, oftentimes made before you have all of the information, in a big way influence what happens next. So it very much matters who is in those shoes and what sort of priorities that they're going to put forward. The other thing that I'd want you to know is, when we talk about some of these bills that are making their way forward, that there are some really interesting, diverse coalitions working, behind the scenes to push these forward. And I'd just kind of like to talk about a few of the efforts that I'm seeing and I'm personally invested in. I know that the league has said that they are, in line with values, or in some cases worthy of opposition. So just to highlight a few of hopefully reforms that are making their way through. I cannot say enough about how important it is that we have independent oversight of our jails and prisons. For those who are following along at home, Arizona just witnessed a historic federal trial that put our for-profit prison healthcare industry under scrutiny. And it lasted almost a month. The testimony was absolutely ghastly. People got to hear about folks who, example, had MS, who had to pay another incarcerated person to feed her because she wasn't able to feed herself and the prisons weren't willing to do it. We got to hear about an incarcerated person who broke their foot and was literally given a Band-Aid. We heard about people who have serious mental illnesses, and instead of getting the help that they need, instead we're giving them podcasts to listen to instead of access to therapy, treatment, and medication. We heard about and the final witness, which is just still harrowing to this day to remember what his testimony was, who has self-injurious behaviors and would bang his head up against the prison doors, and the guards would cheer him on and hurting himself and spray him with pepper balls. So with that being the background about what's happening in our prisons, one of the solutions put forward in a bipartisan way is HB 2222. So it's an easy bill to remember. And it's one that I'm watching that provides actual independent oversight. At this point in time, we're hoping to get on an agenda. And if it's not, you all know what happens with bills that are assigned but never heard. They die a slow and painful death. So that's one that I wanted to highlight and lift up. I think there's a few others that the league has taken an interest in. And I think I'll leave the peremptory bill to Nate in particular, because I know he's going to want to talk about that. I would like to kind of talk just a little bit about HB 2021. And provide the league maybe a little bit of context for this. This is a bill that would essentially make it part of felony murder to be in a position where you're either buying drugs from or with one other person. And if that other person overdoses within 24 hours, it is deemed a much higher offense than simple possession of a substance. It's a dangerous bill. It's one that a few people have commented that is only going to increase the epidemics that we see, as it would actively disincentivize people from seeking help, or in the event of an overdose, seeking medical treatment and calling authorities or EMS. So that's another one that, we're watching as it's making its way through. The last effort that I will lift up and then point you in a direction of we can do even better, Arizona, is with respect to HB 2119. And this is a bill that would kind of require people, when they're discharged from the Department of Corrections, to get a notice about when they can restore their rights. Because keep in mind, in Arizona, if you have been charged with more than 2 felonies, you actually need to apply to the court to renew your civil rights. And those are the rights to vote, to hold public office of trust, to own a firearm, and to serve on a jury. And it's really difficult for formerly incarcerated folks to be able to restore their rights. And because it is a process, it has to be approved by a judge, and it's not as easy as you'd expect. I think a lot of people think that they're able to call up, the county recorder and say, "Hey, Stephen Richer, am I eligible to vote?" And when they find out that the court system doesn't talk to the county recorder's office in a way that allows people to check their eligibility, I just think that's really, it's really problematic, and it actively disincentivizes people once they are restored from their rights from registering to vote, and from people from pursuing it too. Because keep in mind, if you register to vote and you are not in fact eligible, it is a felony offense. So I think there's a big chilling effect that goes with it. And if we want to increase the electorate, we want to make sure that everyone has a voice in this beautiful democracy. One of the best things that we can do is be bold and beautiful with the way we restore our rights after somebody has been convicted of a felony. So those are the 3 that I wanted to highlight for you, but I'm also I'm eager to hear what Nate has to say, and delighted to answer any questions that you might have. He texted he's on his way.
Definitely.
I thought I saw him pop in. There he is.
Here.
Art of magic.
Oh, thank goodness. You would have been a hard act to follow, sir.
I apologize for being late. I was actually testifying against HB 2021. There is a day-long marathon of criminal justice bills today. And I was the main speaker for our side on that. So I couldn't leave the room. And sure enough, they said, as soon as you leave the room, they're going to call the bill. And they called it right as I was about to come up. So I apologize. So I have let's see if I can get this pulled up. Well, actually, let me stay there for a second, since Julie brought it up. HB 2021 is an attempt, a misguided attempt to address the opioid epidemic. We've been fighting. So what I deal with, and what a lot of us deal with in Arizona, is that when we're representing people for example, drug sales cases, by and large, it is people with substance use disorder who are selling small amounts to their friends to support their habit, and the friend might turn around and sell back, the next week. Arizona is not going after the drug dealers. And if big time drug dealers are caught in Arizona, it's usually by the feds. So, and what I see is young kids, people with substance use disorder, going to prison for 5, 10, 15 years for selling a dime bag to their friend. And we've been working over the last several years to address this issue. We've actually blocked bills that would create mandatory minimums for drug sales, particularly with small amounts. I work in a county right now. I came from Pima. I'm now in Pinal County as a senior attorney, and part of that was to specifically tackle their drug bureau that is charging, I had a case where a guy had bought 3 baggies, had 3 grams of drugs, and they charged him with sales because they were baggies. And I was kind of like, well, does the addict or does the dealer put them in the baggies, and then when the person buys them, he combines them all into one bag like a department store? Or is it possible that the person bought 3 baggies for personal use? So we're seeing a lot of overcharging and really this rush to put people in prison and not address their disorder. The bill today was marketed as a fentanyl bill to deal with the fentanyl crisis. So, what the bill did was, or purported to do, was say we're going after fentanyl dealers. And if a person overdoses within 24 hours after ingesting something they got from a fentanyl dealer, then that person's, I can't even argue with that. If that's what the bill actually did, if it was a big time person doling out 10,000 fentanyl pills, I can't argue with that. What the bill actually says is if you sell or transfer any narcotic to another person, they die within 24 hours. And what you sold, shared, did with them is any level of factor in their overdose death within 24 hours, you're on the hook for murder. So, for example, Julie and I could be big partying buds, and I give Julie a bump of Coke. I don't know that Julie's going to go out and do some heroin later, drink a 5th of vodka, and all these things are going to come together. And I have no idea. I don't know what she's done before, or vice versa. I mean, it could be either one of us on any given day if we're both friends, family members, and both suffering from substance use disorder. And so what this bill said is anybody who transfers anything and it plays any role, whether it's 1%, 5%, 100%, you're on the hook for murder. And so the statistics I have on that are that over 50% of people prosecuted in states with these laws are family members, friends, dorm mates, loved ones, boyfriend, girlfriend who both have. So what this bill actually would do is not ever go after the fentanyl dealer who knew that they were selling something that could be deadly. I mean, I would have to line up for tomatoes to be thrown at me if I tried to testify against that. Like if it actually said, you have to be the drug dealer, and I wouldn't be up there speaking at that point. So just as an aside, that's what I was trying to parlay to the members of the committee today, was the breadth of the bill and who could be caught up. And one of the examples was a woman who gave her husband one of her prescription narcotic sleeping pills because he couldn't sleep. And she woke up and the husband was dead because he had a reaction to that sleeping pill. That person would be on the hook for murder under this bill. So just trying to provide the perspective of, let's make sure before we throw all these horrific or all these hugely punitive laws on the books, let's make sure they're doing what we want them to do. And personally, since there's no prosecutors on this call, I think prosecutors, not all, one county attorney actually spoke against the bill, but I think the ones who brought the bill knew exactly what they were doing. I think the ones who brought the bill know who's going to be caught up in the system, and they just want them. We don't want to see those people on our streets. So that's my personal thought on that. So anyway, just to let you know a little about me, and I'm going to rush through a little PowerPoint if I can. Oops, hold on. What did I just do? I did something dumb. There we go.
And Nate, maybe we could ask you to change your screen name. I know Abdi registered you, so you're showing up as Abdi Lopez, but
Let's
just to
see
clarify.
if it will let me do that. I don't know where to do that, actually.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. Oh, there we go. Now it says Nathan.
Oh, great. Thank you. So let's see if I can get this pulled up. Sorry, I am not a Google master by any, or a Zoom master by any stretch.
I also have the PowerPoint if you would like me to share.
That would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I need tech support anytime I do one of these. So I am with Arizona Attorneys for Criminal Justice. I'm a public defender. I got involved in working on criminal justice on the legislative side when I was in law school. I did a judicial internship for a semester with the House Democrats, and I was in a judiciary hearing, and I kind of realized that this horrible bill was going through that was going to put people in prison for longer, and I got caught on camera going like, and and somebody asked if Defense Bar had been consulted on this bill because it was going to cause a lot of mass incarceration. And the sponsor said if Defense Bar wanted to be here, if they wanted a voice in this bill, they'd be here. And I was like, well, wait a minute, why are we here? So I went back to AACJ, I went back to my office, I drove them crazy until they finally said, okay, well, AACJ has always been doing this, but my office back in Pima said, okay, we're going to start getting involved. Because to me, if we're representing indigent clients who are struggling with the sort of things that our clients are representing, to me, this is part of representation. To me, this is protecting people on the front end to make sure, like, it sucks when you have to say to somebody, I know the law is not fair and I have to advise you to take this crappy plea, but there's nothing I can do about it. It makes a big difference when you can say, I know the law is not fair and we're at the legislature and we're trying and we're going to keep fighting for you. And we're going to keep fighting to get you treatment and mental health care, and we're not going to stop. So I look at AACJ, we look at our role as not just individual representation, but these kind of things are part of representing clients, both indigent and non. So yeah, we can go to the. Can I change the slide? So yeah, that was just our little background. We believe that everybody deserves the right to access to a zealous defense. Some things that we generally oppose, we oppose any kind of mandatory minimum sentences. We believe that they don't work. And as we've seen with the atrocities that are happening in DOC, the lack of health care, DOC actually will get up to the legislature and say, we don't provide treatment and we don't provide educational opportunities, and we dare you to make us. So what we do is we cage people with mandatory minimums, and DOC thinks they're the fourth branch of government in Arizona, and they provide nothing. And I don't know how our communities are safer when we're caging people and offering them no resources for assistance, and then we throw them back out and say, you better be good. When they've probably experienced lots of trauma, been forced into gangs, been forced to do things they would have never done, while they're in DOC, and we give them nothing. And then we wonder why there's recidivism, and we wonder why, we're not doing anything towards community safety. So we believe that mandatory minimums are contrary, that every case should be treated individually, and the needs of the victim and the defendant, and a lot of times there's not even a victim when people go to prison, should be taken in. So we work a lot on promoting bills that provide alternatives to prison, such as drug treatment, diversion, access to mental health service. A lot of work. I know we're getting ready to have a record ceiling in general, and then Julie's been doing amazing work on the expungement on marijuana, and we just got, our office is going to start doing some things. I'll tell you that some of the Pinal leadership was very unhappy that we were using public defense resources to work on expungement affairs, but so it's an uphill battle. I mean, and it's one of those things where I just don't understand. It just blows my mind. Okay, I think we go to the next. So some of the things that we've championed in the 4 years since I've been committee chair, and by no means is this all my credit. One of the things that we've done is, so there are low-level felony offenses, a lot of like drug possession, first-time theft, that kind of thing. And they have a thing where if a person does well on probation, they can earn a misdemeanor after completing probation. The problem was that it was treated like a felony while they were on probation. So if the goal is to get clean, get your life together, get the support that you need, how do you do that when you can't get a job, when you can't get a house, or can't get housing, those kind of things? If you have that felony stigma, it basically, we're like, hey, do this and succeed, but here are 5 roadblocks before you can succeed. So what we've done starting in July 1st is that while they're on probation, it will be treated as a misdemeanor. And so if they fail on probation, it can be designated a felony, but we're trying to remove those barriers so that more people can earn that misdemeanor. We also removed a portion that required them to pay all their fines and fees before they could get the misdemeanor. So that's one. And then we're good for the next one. We're really behind a law to allow judges to mitigate fines and fees for indigent defendants, excluding restitution. And actually, we already got significant movement on this last session. I had to explain to a judge last month that the laws changed, that There are statutory fines. For example, drug possession carries a $2,000 fine. Makes no sense to me. Why are we fining people and holding them into a system and messing with their credit because they have a disorder? So we now have a law that says judges can lower fines. They can substitute community service for fines. It exempts things like DUI, because DUI is a very powerful lobby here. But things that we can do to mitigate that for defendants. But I had a case where I was at sentencing and the probation department was saying, no, this fine is too low. You can't agree to this low fine. And I saw it in advance, and so I had to take the new statute to the judge and to probation in the hearing and say, this is now the law. You can, and we built the mitigation into the plea, and you can accept this. So that's going to be, I think, make a huge difference for our clients. I don't know what happened to 3 because, again, PowerPoint and technology is not good. So what should be 3 is a bill that we just got out of committee 2 weeks ago to eliminate fines and fees in all juvenile cases. Especially the biggest opposition we got when we brought this last year was the smaller counties who funded their entire juvenile correction system on fines and fees levied on juveniles. That makes, and they were like, well, we can't lose that money. And it's like, go ask for it somewhere else. Like it's incentivizing, criminalizing children. So we did get that out of committee, and we're hoping and anticipating that it will pass. The House is a little more amenable a lot of times to criminal justice in Arizona. So we've got a little hurdle even on that in the Senate, but I mean, who really wants to put their name on that as opposing that? Okay, next slide, please. Oh, there we go. There's 3. Sorry, I'm a little punchy. I've been in the judiciary for 4 hours straight. As far as leveling the playing field, this was a huge win this past year. We passed a bill that that blocked courts from suspending driver's license for unpaid civil fines and fees. And it automatically restored any driver's license that had been suspended for inability to pay fines and fees. So anybody who was in current suspension had their license restored. The reason this is important is the unpaid fines that lead to a suspension can cause someone to be pulled over. It encourages profiling. It encourages presumptory stops or preemptory stops. It encourages basically officers to like pick and say, well, that car looks like they probably can't afford stuff, so let's see if they have a suspended license. Also, if you have a DUI and you have a suspended license solely because you couldn't afford your fines and fees, and you don't even have to know your license has been suspended, the DUI goes from a misdemeanor to a felony just for that. So that was a huge thing for us, and we think it's going to make a huge difference when it comes to profiling and stops. So so I just included the language, and I'm sorry I didn't put bill numbers on here, but I can get those for you. I saw a chat. So that's a really, really big deal, and a bunch of people in August, thousands of people got their licenses back in August. So big win. Okay, let's see. And we actually got some press on that. So I went into a little bragging about ACJ. We ended up in the press with a quote from my co-chair. And yeah, I underestimated. It was about 30,000 people who are going to get their licenses back. And Steve is a fantastic co-chair and a hugely dedicated criminal justice reformer as well. Okay, to the next one. This is the one I was just talking about, the record sealing. So the work that Julie did on marijuana expungement is where we aspire to be in general. Right now, what we were able to do was get the courts to agree that if you've gone without felonies for a certain amount of time, you can have your record sealed. It's very watered down from the original version, but we have found that that's how the legislature works. And sometimes you just need to get it on the books. So we needed to get the concept into statute, and then we'll continue to work on it. It took us 5 years to get this watered down version into statute. And what it means is you don't have to mark after you've had this record sealing, you don't have to mark that you had a felony on job applications. You don't have to mark it on housing applications. It can come back and be used if you are arrested on another felony and you go to trial, which is something we didn't want. But it's a start, and it's at least started getting people to start thinking that it's okay to do this. And that was our biggest goal with getting something on the books. So, all right, next slide. Okay, here's what's going on, and I'll go real fast because I don't want to eat up time, and I know the fantastic Representative Hernandez is waiting. Again, any minimum sentence we're against. Any bill that limits the ability of judges to use discretion to deviate from current sentencing scheme. Arizona has the harshest sentencing scheme in the country as far as state legislatures. It's from the 90s, for the tough on crime era. We were, when I started doing this work, we were like 46th. Now we're 50th, because even like Oklahoma, Texas, Utah, Mississippi have revised their criminal codes. So, oh, I have more time then. What we've been working on for the past couple of years is a bill to allow judges to deviate from the sentencing scheme if, after a trial or after mitigation is presented, they can list reasons and not follow the sentencing scheme and actually give a reduced sentence if they feel like it's in order. Prosecutors have fought this. One of the things that we've pointed out this year is they also have fought a transparency bill that would require prosecutors to report data on when they're brought charges, how they indict, how they plead, how they resolve a case based on race, socioeconomic status, gender, lots of identifiers, and they don't have to see the person. It's just what they see on the police report and then what they do with that case beyond. And because what they're arguing is, we know that there's racial disparity, for example, in charging and arrests. We know there's racial disparity in sentencing. And so the prosecutors fight this bill every year because they say the judges are responsible for the disparities and you can't trust the judges. And anybody who's been involved in the system knows that by the time a case is resolved and gets to a judge, between the archaic sentencing structure and the coercive plea dealing, the judge often has very little room within to sentence. So it's really not the judge. And so what we're saying is, either let the judges have a safety valve or support the transparency bill so we can see where these disparities are happening, because there's no data on the disparities right now. So they fight the judicial safety valve and they fight the transparency bill. And it's extremely frustrating because it's a catch-22. But we actually have some movement on the judicial safety valve this year. So we may get that moving forward, fingers crossed. And again, the 2 and 3 go together. Obviously, reproductive rights are a huge issue with the legislature this year. And there's a ton of organizations working on it. So our group is taking the lead on the criminalization side, because that fits the mission of AACJ. We partner with lots of other organizations, but what we've decided to focus on is the bills that actually criminalize a woman seeking access to abortion, or a doctor for providing treatment, or providing medical care and providing abortions. That's actually on the table, is to make that a class 2 or 3 felony, I think. There was one today, and not just reproductive rights, but trans rights as well. There was a bill today, and I was in the House, but in the Senate, they were hearing a bill to criminalize doctors who provide treatment for trans people seeking to be who they are and seeking to have the necessary medication and safe treatment. So those are things that when we see that kind of criminalization, we're going to be out there, fighting it. And then there's a ton of bills on protecting police. After George Floyd, there are bills to allow police to determine how big a crime scene and a premises is. So like, for example, with Mr. Floyd's murder, under this bill, the police could have cleared that sidewalk so that nobody could have filmed what happened. But they also there's a bill to remove civilians from police review boards. The one I just saw, the version I saw yesterday, says officers, the review board has to be 2/3 officers, like police officers who have been through training. So they would let civilians on, but they have to pay for the training themselves, which is cost. You know what audience that gets rid of? That gets rid of people who can't afford the training, who are the people that usually get arrested. And now it says in addition to 2/3 police, 51% of the board has to vote to open an investigation. So, yes, the unlawful to film police, you have to be 15 feet away, I believe. And when you take that with the premises bill, it gets even broader. There was, I just thought of the other one that was really bad with police. Redact body cams. So when there's a FOIA request for body cams, and I think it actually passed last year, that says if DPS or the law enforcement agency believes that the material in the body cam is harmful to the state, they can refuse to turn it over. So they can defy a FOIA request. So now the defense still gets it. So, and if my client's fine with it, we can release it. So, I think there's workarounds, and we're looking at all of those options. But, I feel like when the idea to the complete opening of police brutality, and particularly brutality against people of color, and when your response is not to say, okay, we got to call attention to this, we've got to have more accountability for our law enforcement, when the response is, we've got to make all these laws to cover it up, we've got to make all these laws to keep it from coming out, you have to ask, why, and what's the the purpose of that. So we're fighting all of those as well. There's a law, I think, that's going to committee tomorrow. They dropped about 500 bills last week, so I'm trying to catch up as quickly as possible. But there was one that would expand justification defense. Now, as a defense attorney, I usually like that idea. When you read the bill, it is very specific. It allows officers to use deadly force in places they were not allowed to use deadly force before, including running away from police. So they're not in danger, but a police can shoot a person running away from them under this bill. It allows civilians to use deadly force if they fear that someone might commit a crime. So right now, justification is, I have to come onto your property to use deadly force. If I'm illegally entering your property and I'm on the property, I can't leave my property and say, I thought you might have come on. So anyway, so while there's one specifically for the Ahmaud Arbery case that would allow that situation to have a justification defense. So, and I'll stop there because there's so much.
There is, and your presentation goes on, and I feel like this is one of many other conversations we can have. So in the chat, there are some questions for you, Nate, in the Q&A. So one of them is, was the committee amiable to the amendment or the modifications or the prevention of HB 2021 you testified today?
They were not. So I actually left, they were still going. So I don't know if it passed yet or not, passed committee. We will still try to kill it on the floor, but there were some who were open to it and others who were absolutely not. So
we'll see. So is there a correlation between the harsh sentencing in Arizona and increased or decreased criminal activity?
I haven't seen it. I actually think that the harsh sentencing causes more criminal activity because we're not using our prisons in any way to be a rehabilitative place. And, again, when people come out with no skills, when they come out having used more drugs than they ever used before they went into DOC, again, a lot of times they're not equipped to be on the outside, and that's our fault.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I know, Julie, you're typing in a question to Laura's question about, recidivism, and you guys can see the actual question on the Q&A. So Julie, I don't know if you want to jump in and answer that question live. Mm-hmm.
Sure. I mean, I think it's tied to Nate's last answer too. I mean, first, nothing about mass incarceration makes us safer, and that is not a political belief. That is objectively so. And every major study locking up more people does not keep our communities safer. If anything, it destabilizes families. It is an adverse, it's one of the ACEs when it comes to childhood. In fact, it could in fact be creating situations where families have experienced more trauma. And as a result, we see increases in crime when we lock up people to the rate we have been. Unpleasant reminder, Arizona is still the 5th largest incarcerator in the country and 8th largest in the world in our rate of incarceration. So to Laura's question, what do we do? How do we change the metric for success for county attorneys? Well, I mean, I have a few different answers. First, these 15 county attorneys are all elected. The positions come up again in 2024. Get engaged in those races because all of these bills that we're talking about today, in fact, almost every single one of them are things that a county attorney could do with a stroke of a pen and a change of a policy. And instead, we're having to have these fights at the legislature when a county attorney acting responsibly could use their discretion to implement it. I think the other thing we need to do is pay really a close attention on how the press covers crime and justice issues in our state. Because for better or worse, the public is still not thinking about these issues in a way that's rooted in evidence-based best practices. And they still think that the answer to society's ills is to lock them up. And that's not sustainable. That's not just, that's not humane. And we need to pay really close attention about the kind of media we consume and hold press accountable when they're buying into that knee-jerk narrative that more incarceration equals more safety.
And as far as accountability, so if they have that much power or if their policies are abusive, what practices or what accountability is there for Maricopa County attorneys or county attorneys?
Sure. Well, if you're talking about line attorneys, historically, there really hasn't been that many. We can recall not that far back where we had Andrew Thomas, for example, who was disbarred along with several of his assistants. But that doesn't really happen that frequently. You'll see in prosecutors' offices, even if there's demonstrated misconduct as identified by a judge, you still don't see reports to the bar, and you still don't see a push within that office to hold line attorneys accountable. When we're talking about those are all things that could again be changed if your county attorneys had their priorities straight. But when we're talking about the elected officials in Arizona, especially countywide, enjoy a special privilege. And maybe you remember this from the Paul Peterson case, that really, unless they leave their jobs and abandon the post, or unless they're recalled, which is a massive proposition, not undoable, but massive, there's not an accountability other than the ballot box and elections. It's not as if the county board can ask a prosecutor that they don't like or isn't doing the job. They can't hold them accountable in any other meaningful sort of way.
Very well, and we know that there are a few members that are new and people that want to get involved. I know we have but a few minutes, so keep putting your questions on the chat. But we want to invite you guys to be part of the efforts with the League of Women Voters. We might have some people, from the public here today as well. Join the League and our efforts. We want to continue having these conversations and pushing for these bills. So we put a lot of bills in the chat, but in our weekly RTS that we're monitoring, we tell you which bills are in line with our position, and some of our coalition members like the AJAA and other organizations, right? So stay tuned, and we'll share our emails on the screen and also on the chat, where if you want to get involved, both Nancy and I, welcome each of you. So we have about 1 or 2 more minutes. So for questions.
Yes, and I would just like to remind folks that all League of Women Voters Arizona members receive our call to action automatically, but if you are not a member of the League, you can still sign up for our action alert without joining on the League of Women Voters Arizona website. I would also like to remind folks that we have an in-person day tomorrow as part of our legislative week. I'm putting the link in the chat to register. That is for League members only, and you do have to register in advance, but you can still register today if you would like to come down to the Capitol tomorrow for our in-person day. We have some legislators who will address the group and some other activities planned for the in-person day.
All right, so we have about 1 more minute for questions. Let's see if there are any. Does providing support or oppose in in the request to speak actually do anything?
Can I answer that? Because had you asked me 30 minutes ago, I would say no, nobody is paying attention, it seems like. And if you've sat through one of these committee meetings where you feel like legislation is just pushed through without the thoughtful consideration that, for example, the League of Women Voters provides, I'd say you'd be right. That being said, the cruel, harsh, and inhumane trans bill about providers and criminalizing providers of gender affirming care just got defeated in committee 4-4. And parents did that, you all did that, registering your voices on RTS, tweeting mean things at people when they are being unfair. That all worked, and we can celebrate for one hot second.
All right, very good. So Penny, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Abdi, and thank you so much, Nancy, for putting this together. Really appreciate the hard work that both Abdi and Nancy are doing in our criminal justice reform. Julie, thank you for your expert and input, and also to Nate for, wow, I am very new to this, so it is an eye-opener. It is soul-wrenching, but it's time for us to really step up in this space. Nancy and Abdi, thank you again. Thank you everyone who is here this afternoon, joining us in our third Lunch and Learn session. As Nancy mentioned, if you're a league member, you can join us at the Capitol tomorrow, but we do need to know pretty soon because we have to have a count in the event that you'd like to have lunch with us. We also would like to encourage you to join us for another robust discussion on Friday, which will be about mobilizing to defend democracy. The Secretary of State will be coming to speak to us, and so will 2 of our partners, one All Voting is Local and the other is the Arizona Democracy Research Collaborative. And we'll be talking about voting rights and voting rights bills. Not a lot of good news on that front, but we have to keep the fight going. So thank you, everybody. Wish you the best. Whatever you have plans for today, we hope it goes very well.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Mm-hmm.